Alrighty, this is Psych 124 Test 2. Quite a bit of stuff here actually, but hopefully it won't be too bad. Chapter 5, Head Sparing. Head sparing is a biological protection of the brain when malnutrition temporarily affects body growth. The brain is the last part of the body to be damaged by malnutrition. That's head sparing. The cortex of the brain, crucial for humans, most thinking, feeling, and sensing occurs here. The frontal cortex that assists in planning, self-control, self-regulation, it's very immature in the newborn. The auditory is on the side of the head. Hearing is quite acute at birth, results of months of eavesdropping during the fetal period. Visual is posterior. It's the least mature sense at birth because the fetus has nothing to see in the womb. And then the prefrontal, it's the last part to mature, area for anticipation, planning, and impulse control. It's inactive in infancy, becomes more efficient over years of childhood and adolescence. Self-righting, the inborn drive to remedy developmental deficits, literally to return to sitting or standing upright after being tipped over, like the Weebles Wobbles toys. People of all ages have self-righting impulses for emotional as well as physical imbalances. An example would be infants with few toys develop their brain with whatever is available. That's an example of self-righting. REM sleep versus quiet sleep. REM sleep is rapid eye movement sleep. This declines with age. Newborn babies spend half their time in REM sleep. Quiet sleep, this increases at about 3 months. Senses at birth. All senses function at birth. Sensation, it's a response of the sensory system when it detects stimulus. It begins with our outer organs, our nose, our eyes, etc. Perception, mental processing of sensory information when the brain interprets sensation. It begins in the brain and it requires experience. So that perception begins in the brain, but that does require experience. Cognition, thinking about what was perceived. So you perceive something, then you have to think about it. That's the cognition part. Listening begins prenatally and is acute at birth. Certain sounds trigger newborn reflexes. Newborns are particularly attentive to human voices. States mandate that the hearing test be done before the baby leaves the hospital. Vision, or looking, the least mature sense at birth. Visual experience combined with the visual cortex. Maturation improves with vision. With time, scanning becomes more organized and centered. Binocular vision, the ability to focus two eyes in a coordinated manner to see a single image. That's binocular vision. Tasting, it functions at birth. Normally the babies are calmed by sugar and they're sensitive to sour. Touch, comforted by human touch, they feel pain. Smell, can distinguish between odors and has preferences between odors. Early sensation is organized for social interaction and comfort. This functions at birth and it rapidly adapts. Let me say that again. Early sensation is organized for social interaction and comfort. This functions at birth and rapidly adapts. Reflexes. Breathing is a reflex that maintains our oxygen. Kicking and crying, that maintains the body temperature. Rooting and sucking, that helps manage feeding. Swallowing obviously aids feeding. Spitting up, if too much has been swallowed. Crying when hungry. Moro is the outstretched arms and legs. If suddenly dropped and startled, the baby will produce that Moro reflex. And then the Babinski reflex is when the toes fan and curl and the bottom of the feet are stroked. Immunization, a process that stimulates the body's immune system to defend against attack by a particular disease. Sudden infant death syndrome, or SIDS. Seemingly healthy infant at least 2 months old suddenly stops breathing and dies unexpectedly while asleep. Cause is unknown. Some of the risks: the baby lying on the stomach when they are put to sleep, secondhand smoke, a low birth weight, more common in boys 2 to 4 months old, more likely in the winter months when they're going to have those blankets and stuff in there with them, most likely to happen at home in the crib. Studies show that 26% have lower serotonin levels. Prevention of SIDS. Remove loose and soft bedding. Eliminate secondhand smoke. Prolong breastfeeding. Lay the baby on its back. The baby sleep in the same room as parents for the first year with a pacifier. Put a fan in the baby's room. Encourage tummy time when awake due to the flat head from sleeping on the baby's back. Bottle feeding. It's better if the mother is HIV or drug addicted. It's better that they bottle feed. This also gives the father more involvement and care in the workplace, not always conducive to breastfeeding. Pardon me. Allergies. So bottle feeding is better if the mother is HIV or drug addicted, and it also gives the father more involvement and care in the workplace. And also the workplace is not always conducive to breastfeeding. Breastfeeding begins with colostrum, which is a thick, high-calorie fluid secreted by the mother at birth with antibodies in it. Some advantages are it is easily digestible, it has antibodies and antibacterial properties, which are better for the baby's overall health. It increases bonding, it's less expensive, and the baby's going to have fewer allergies. Marasmus and kwashiorkor diseases. Those are direct results in malnutrition. Marasmus and kwashiorkor diseases are direct results in malnutrition. Vitamin D deficiency. Causes by lack of sunshine. Most mothers believe breast milk is full of vitamin D. It is not. Also rickets, caused by severe deficiency of vitamin D. This is naturally produced by the body in response to sunshine. Rickets are going to have soft bones, an enlarged heart, and organs that shut down in severe cases. Moving on to Chapter 6. Jean Piaget believed that infants are smart and active learners, adapting to experience. Adaptation is the core to intelligence. Adaptation is the core to intelligence. Piaget believed that children are active learners. They don't think like adults. A child's reasons are more important than what they know. Didn't spell that correctly. All thinking begins with schemas, and we all desire cognitive equilibrium, which is achieved through adaptation. Assimilation, adding new info to existing info. Accommodation, change an existing schema to accommodate a new experience, such as a dog has 4 legs, but a little kid won't associate a cat having 4 legs and a cow having 4 legs. When they do, they're accommodating. They're changing their existing schema. Sensory motor intelligence. Active intelligence causing babies to think while using sense and motor skills. The first 2 years happens in the first 2 years in 6 different stages. So the sensory motor intelligence, active intelligence causing babies to think while using their sense and motor skills. The first 2 years in 6 different stages. Stage 1, birth to 1 month. You get the reflexes such as sucking, grasping, staring, and listening. Stage 2 is 1 to 4 months. This would include primary circular reactions. Infants are involved in activity that responds to their own bodies. It's repeated and refined. Secondary circular reactions. Infants respond to objects and people. Tertiary circular reactions. Infants respond with actions and ideas. This is the most creative of those reactions. Object permanence, realization that objects, including people, still exist when they can no longer be seen, touched, or heard. Deferred imitation, perception of something someone else does, modeling, then performing the action at a later time. It appears at the end of the first 2 years. So they imitate. Deferred imitation, they imitate something that someone else does at a later time. Affordances, opportunities for perception and interaction offered by the environment. How something is perceived and acted upon depends on their past experiences, their current developmental level, their sensory awareness of the opportunities, and their immediate needs and motivation. What you can do with it, such as a ball, you can kick it, you can throw it, you can bounce it. Those are all affordances of the ball. Dynamic perception. One of two principles explaining infant perception, namely that from birth perception is primed to focus on movement and change. The second principle explaining infant perception is that babies are fascinated by people. So the dynamic perception that namely that from birth to perception the baby is primed to focus on movement and change. And then the second part of that is the infant perception is that babies are fascinated by people. That's dynamic perception. People preference. The universal principle of infants' perception consisting of an innate attraction to other humans, evident in visual, auditory, tactile, and other preferences. That's their people preferences. Child direct speech. A high-pitched, simplified, and repetitive ways adults talk to babies helps babies comprehend. It's universally is called baby talk. The universal sequence of language development. If you just follow this through, it makes sense. Reflective speech at 1 month. Cooing at 3 months. Babbling at 6 months. General babbling. 9 months, it would be specific babbling. Gestures at 10 months. A few words at a year. And 2 words at 2 years. So the only thing that's a little odd about that is they started off with reflective speech and then move into cooing, and then babbling, and then gestures, and then a few words, and then 2-word sentences. So the universal sequence of language development starts with that reflective speech at 1 month. A holophrase is a single word that expresses a complete meaningful thought. An example would be more or bye-bye. Those are holophrases. Alrighty, that was it on Chapter 6. Chapter 7. Crisis according to Erikson. Trust and mistrust. Basic needs to be met with consistency, continuity, and sameness. Continuity, I'm sorry. Jeez, I didn't spell it right. Crises according to Erikson. Trust versus mistrust. The basic needs to be met with consistency, continuity, and sameness. This is when the infant learns whether the world can be trusted to meet their basic needs from birth to 1 year. That's trust versus mistrust. Can they trust you to do it or not? Autonomy versus shame. Basic desire to, I can't even tell what I put in here. The basic desire to gain self-rule over their own actions and bodies, and to feel ashamed if it doesn't happen. That's autonomy versus shame. That happens at about 18 months. So according to Erikson, trust versus mistrust, birth to 1 year, and then autonomy versus shame at about 18 months. The New York longitudinal study, there were 4 categories they came up with. Got an easy baby that is predictable and adaptable, 40%. They're the most of all. They're the most. 40%. Slow to warm up. They're shy. Initial unwillingness to adapt, but they adjust with time. That's 15% of the babies. Difficulty. Irregular, intense, easily disturbed, unhappy, hard to distract. Those are only 10% of the babies. Hard to classify. They don't fit neatly into any category. Those are 35%. Goodness of fit. Adapt parenting style to the child's temperament, an adjustment that allows smooth infant-caregiver interaction. Pardon me. Synchrony. Coordinated, rapid, and smooth exchange of responses between a caregiver and an infant. That's synchrony. Attachment. Enduring emotional connection that produces a desire for continual contact and a feeling of distress during separation. Children show attachment through proximity-seeking behaviors, contact-meaning behaviors. Parents will also exhibit these behaviors. Secure attachment. There's a relationship of trust and confidence that provides comfort, assurance, and a secure base. An insecure attachment, the relationship is unpredictable, it's unstable. Social referencing. Seeking emotions or info from others. Babies will look to caregivers for cues. And remember, on social referencing, we're talking about like if a baby goes up and touches an electrical outlet and then looks at mama to see if they're going to get in trouble or not. That's called social referencing. Seeking emotion or info from others. Babies looking to caregivers for cues. Mother and father interactions. Fathers who are involved in demonstrated patience to infants often have children who are not aggressive. Fathers elicit smiles and reactions from their infants, and moms and dads need to interact together for a well-balanced child, each giving the child what the other cannot. That was it on Chapter 7. Chapter 8. Poor eating habits. Appetites are decreased. They need fewer calories. Important that they be nutritious as they start getting older. They tend to follow example of adults. Eat too much sugar and fat, too few fruits and vegetables. Children are drinking less milk and may not be getting enough calcium. Iron deficiency and anemia. They need more quality meats, whole grains, eggs, dark green and leafy vegetables. Iron deficiency, anemia. They need more quality meats, whole grains, eggs, dark green and leafy vegetables. Let's see, what else do we have here? We're still on Chapter 8, I think. Oops. Yep. Still on Chapter 8. Myelination is a process by which axons become insulated with a coating of myelin, a fatty substance that speeds transmission of nerve impulses. Gross motor skills versus fine motor skills. Gross motor skills are your large body movements. They improve with running, jumping, etc. These are mastered with practice and develop as rapidly as the brain matures. Motivation, guided practice, and innate ability allows. Fine motor skills, small body movements, harder to master, such as pouring a liquid, cutting food, holding a crayon. Patience and practice and good judgment are needed to develop the fine motor skills. There are 3 levels of prevention: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary prevention, an action that changes the overall background conditions to prevent some unwanted event or circumstance from ever happening. The situation is structured to make injuries less likely. An example of a primary prevention would be a stable neighborhood. Basic set of values is needed. Secondary prevention, actions that avert harm in the immediate situation. It spots and treats at-risk children, potentially can stigmatize the family as inadequate and promote a negative feeling of helplessness. And then tertiary prevention, actions taken after an adverse event to reduce the harm or prevent disability. Halting harm when it occurs, then treating the victim, such as removal of from the family or adoption or foster care. Maltreatment. It can be abuse and neglect. Neglect is the most common. Child maltreatment is intentional harm or avoidable endangerment to child. That's child maltreatment. Child abuse is the deliberate action that is harmful to the child's well-being. Child neglect is the failure to meet the child's basic need. This is twice as common as abuse. Failure to thrive is a common symptom. Mandated reporting law. If you work with the public and suspect abuse, you must report it. Moving on, Chapter 9, for the sneeze, pardon me. Goodness. Chapter 9, centration. Centration is the tendency to focus on one aspect of a situation. Egocentrism or egocentration, the contemplation of the world exclusively from the child's personal perspective. empathy can be an exception to that. Pardon me. Okay, back to where we were. Start again. Concentration is the tendency to focus on one aspect of a situation. Egocentrism or egocentration is the contemplation of the world exclusive from the child's personal perspective. Empathy is an exception to that. Conservation. Principle that the amount of substance is unaffected by changes in the appearance. Applied to liquids, numbers, math, length. Understanding develops by age 7 and then slowly and unevenly. Conservation. Remember that conservation is the principle but that the amount of a substance is unaffected by the changes in its appearance. Scaffolding. Sensitive structuring of child's participation in learning encounters. That's scaffolding. Apprentices. Children as apprentices. Children don't strive alone. Their efforts are embedded in a social context. Parents guide young children's cognitive growth in many ways. Guided participation. Process by which young children, with the help of mentors, learn to think by having social experiences and by exploring their universe. The zone of proximal development. Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. Skills too difficult for child to perform alone, but that can be performed with guidance and assistance of adults or more skilled children. The lower limit can be reached independently. The upper limit can be reached with assistance. The zone of proximal development is a measure of learning potential. Fast mapping. Speedy and not a precise way a child assimilates new words by mentally charting them into interconnected categories. Okay, almost done. Chapter 10. I think we're almost done. Yep, chapter 10. Preschooler's view of self. This is a preschooler's view of self. Initiative versus guilt. They're going to have self-esteem emerges at this time, and self-concept, and understanding of the self develops. Parents need to reinforce children's play, answer their questions so they don't feel guilty about what they're doing. Prosocial behavior. Feelings and actions that are helpful and kind but of no obvious benefit to oneself. That's prosocial behavior. Antisocial behavior is feelings and actions that are deliberately hurtful or destructive to other persons. Types of aggressions. There are 4 of them. Instrumental. Instrumental aggression is used to obtain an object such as a toy. That's common in little kids. Reactive involves retaliation for an action, whether it was intentional or not. Relational is designed to inflict psychic or mental pain, becoming more hurtful as children mature. And then bullying, an unprovoked attack to inflict harm. 3 styles of parenting. Authoritarian, permissive, and authoritative. Authoritarian, they have high standards and expectations. Low nurturing. Children are likely to become conscientious, obedient, and quiet, but not happy. Permissive, they lack self-control, but they're nurturing. Likely to lack self-control and are not happy. Authoritative, goodness gracious, limits and guidance provided by willing to compromise. Likely to be successful, articulate, intelligent, and happy. 2 to 6-year-olds are most likely to receive physical punishment. A timeout, when they sit, normally for timeout, they say it's 1 minute for each year-old. Emotional regulation. The most important emotional development during childhood is to direct and modify one's feelings, particularly fear, frustration, and anger. Self-control must be modeled by the parents and others. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to pronounce this. Perseveration. Sticking with a subject or thought and not being willing or able to let go of it. Rough and tumble play helps develop muscle strength and control. Look for the play face to be sure no one's being hurt. Socio-dramatic play, kids explore and rehearse social roles they have seen. This helps the child to regulate their emotions through imagination. Helps the child test the ability to convince others. Gender differences, culturally imposed differences in roles and behaviors. So the gender is culturally imposed differences. They're more significant to children than they are to adults. Sex differences, the biological differences between males and females. It's far less apparent in the child than it is in adulthood. Alrighty, that's it for that review. Go through it again and you'll do well.